Hello folks, so in this video I wanted to talk about how do you find if you have Nginx instances running in your environment. So this I did as part of trying to understand this is part of the whole Nginx upgrade that I was planning for in the previous videos that I had spoken about. So this is for that. So this is for understanding how many Nginx instances are there and what are the versions and whatnot. But for now, I just wanted to understand how many Nginx instances are running in the environment so that I know which Nginx instances to check the version for and upgrade it to. So I need to upgrade if any Nginx version is pretty low where it's not maintained, the version is not supported anymore, it's not maintained anymore and whatnot, right? So to check the different Nginx instances running in the environment, I was thinking about what can we do, right? One basic thing that came up to my mind was like, why not just check the image names of all the containers? So we run a Kubernetes cluster, so it's a containerized environment. So every container runs something. So if the container is running an image where the image name says Nginx, it's probably an Nginx, right? When I came up with this idea, I realized that well, the name need not say Nginx, right? So then I thought, okay, let's just run the Nginx command, and that way you should just know. So then a colleague of mine told me that hey, it's possible that the Nginx command works in all the containers. Like you run the Nginx command in all the containers, it works like say version command, and but I mean it's possible that it will work maybe because it's installed and it's present in the base image or it's present in the container image, but Nginx is not running in it, right? He kind of hinted at something like that, right? Something of that sorts. So then I started realizing, okay, so there are a lot of loopholes in my ideas. So I started ideating about what can we do to find out if Nginx instances are running in the environment and how many are running and what are they now, right? So the current basic set of blind checks that I came up with was this. So assuming the environment is a container-based environment, right? This is the set of checks that I came up with. But there are other kinds of environments like virtual machines, physical machines, and all that. So I don't know. There are things like unikernels and all. So you'll have to figure out how to do it in them. So for container environments, I thought I'll just come up with some ideas. So in this case, it's specifically Kubernetes container environment because it can be something like say Nomad, or if you're using something like something old like Apache Mesosphere and whatnot, right? So for HashiCorp Nomad, Apache Mesosphere, you might have to think about in that case what to do, because I don't think they have a concept of pods there. In Nomad, I think it's jobs. In Apache Mesosphere, I don't know what it is. So here in Kubernetes, it's called pods, and then pods have containers. So your terminologies will differ, and slight changes will be there in some things that you do. But other than that, most of the things should be same if it's a container-based environment. But if it's something else, say virtual machines or physical machines, you'll have to probably the mechanism will change. For example, you'll have to do an SSH instead of doing a kubectl exec in the case of a Kubernetes environment to get into the pod and run something, right? And to get into the container and run something. And what else? So similar stuff. So let's get into the details, right? So one of the blind basic checks that I thought about after thinking about the whole image name and Nginx command was something as simple as check if the names of the containers in the like pods, right? There are many pods and each pod has probably many containers. So check if the names of all the containers in all the pods have Nginx in the name, and also check if the names of all the pods have Nginx in the name, right? So just check for the name Nginx in the container name in all the containers and in the pod name in all the pods. So why this is based on the idea that like if Nginx is running in a container or a pod, its container or pod name probably has the name Nginx in it, right? But then this doesn't ensure, just because the name says Nginx doesn't mean, it doesn't ensure and it doesn't mean that surely Nginx is running in it, right? So what is the problem with this approach? So it misses out containers where container name may not mention or will not mention Nginx, but maybe Nginx is running in them. You never know, right? or it misses out pods where the pod name may not mention Nginx, but maybe Nginx is running in them. You never know again. Maybe some containers have Nginx in the container name, but may not be running Nginx, right? So you never know. So it may not be running Nginx in them. So maybe some pods may have Nginx in the pod name, but maybe not running Nginx in them again. Like, you never know. So just because the name says Nginx doesn't mean Nginx is running in them, and just because it doesn't have the name Nginx doesn't mean it's not running there. So you just cannot relate with the container name or pod name with to actually if Nginx is running there or not, right? So you cannot be sure at least, right? It's just data and maybe may not be. So it's like a maybe only. So that's why it's like a basic check, a blind check. You're not checking it properly, right? So and then the next basic blind check is like check if the image names of the containers, which is what I said, of all the containers and all the pods have Nginx in the name, right? So why this is based on the idea that if Nginx is running in a container, its image name probably has the name Nginx in it, probably, right? So probably is the problem. So it misses out containers where the image name may not mention Nginx, but maybe Nginx is running in them, or maybe some containers may have Nginx in the name in the image name, but maybe are not running, maybe not running Nginx in them, right? So you never know, right? So just a moment. There's one more thing that you can do. So this so check if the command names of all the containers and all the pods have Nginx in the name. For example, you basically say this refers to the container command containers command field, not the args field. Okay. Um, so you can also check if the command name or command names or entry points of all the containers, of all the container images, of all the containers having this refers to, so that if Nginx named command is running in a container, so yeah, it's command name probably has name in it. So basically we are talking about the command name over here. So command name or entry point which is present in, say, in a container image specification, right? The specification, for example, Docker file, right? So just a moment. So basically we are talking about, say, I said image names. Now the command name that you mention in, say, your container image specification, right? So for example, the Docker file in the case of Docker containers, or like basically Docker container images, usually people use Docker file, but I guess if you have some other container runtime and it has its own file that it uses to build an image, so you can check out the specification, the build specification, build and runtime specification of the container image, for example Docker file. Because when I say build specification, I'm talking about, or the runtime specification, basically runtime specification refers to commands like cmd, which talk about what is the command to be run when the container starts, or entry point, which is the entry point for when the container starts, right? So check if the command names or entry points of all the container images and or, so container images of all the containers and all the pods have Nginx in the name, right? Um, so if the name, like if it has Nginx, have Nginx in them in the command name or entry point, right? So why this is based on the idea that if Nginx is running in a container, its command name is probably its command name probably has the name Nginx in it, right? So problems with the approach, of course, it misses out containers where the command name, its command name, wait a minute, or entry point name, where the command name or entry point, let's just make it as 2 words because it's actually 2 words. Entry points, entry point, entry point may not mention Nginx, but maybe Nginx is running through. And then maybe some containers may have Nginx in the command name or entry point name, right? But maybe may not be running Nginx in them, so you never know, right? So look at command names in the specification. The next thing you can do is look at the command names in the container spec. So in the container spec. So this is container specification, right? This is the build and runtime specification of the container is, right? So here this is the container specification. So where the command name has Nginx in it. So for example, the command field in the case of like Kubernetes, I think let me show it to you. Kubernetes.io, and you have a pod. So pods command. See, so there's a container and then this is the command. Right? So if you have the command name, let's say the first string is actually a Nginx, then you'll notice, okay, it's probably Nginx. But of course, just because the name says Nginx, it can be a shell script running something random, let's say configuring an Nginx or something like that, right? And so it can say Nginx and it may not be running Nginx, and it can not say Nginx. It can be say run server, and inside that it could be running Nginx or whatever, and like it can be a script or whatever, and then running Nginx. So in which case the command name doesn't have Nginx in it, but it's actually running an Nginx. So in both these cases you would never know, right? So then next, so this one I mentioned, check if Nginx command works. So, but yeah, maybe there's no command, if Nginx command works in all the containers, for example, Nginx-FN version, right? So if it works, great. It's possible that Nginx is running, but you can't be sure. Because so this idea is based on the idea that if Nginx is running in a container, it has Nginx command installed in it, right? So, but it's not exactly necessary in the sense that it can be like if Nginx is running in a container, but maybe some other with some other command name, right? Probably web server or whatever, or server. And even if there's a command named Nginx and Nginx-FN version works, it is not necessary that it's an Nginx server. It can be something else. And even if Nginx-FN version command works, it doesn't mean that Nginx is running in it. Just because Nginx command is present and it's working and it's showing the version and all, doesn't mean Nginx is running in it. So maybe it's installed. Maybe some other command is named as Nginx. Maybe Nginx command is renamed as something else which doesn't refer to Nginx in the name, right? So some other command is named as Nginx, some other command, and not Nginx server, right? So these can be some problems. And then finally, something that you can check if, so all these times we were saying Just because Nginx is installed in the container, it doesn't mean it's running. So maybe Nginx is installed but it's not running, or maybe the name is Nginx but it's not running. So wherever we see, can you see clearly we're saying it's not running. So can you check if Nginx is running? That's what we want, right? Nginx instance is running in the environment. So check if the Nginx process is running in all the containers and all the pods. Why? This is based on the idea that like if Nginx is running in a container, then it's running in the container, right? But the problems with this approach, right? It's not easy to check if Nginx is running in a container. For example, one thing that one could do is check the Nginx process. Check if the Nginx process is running by checking psaux command, and assuming psaux works, command output, and checking if there's any process running the Nginx command, like a command which says Nginx as the name, right? Whether a command can be named anything else too and still be running Nginx, you never know. psaux just looks at the command name, right? So it can be named something else, and also just because has Nginx in it or the name itself is Nginx, the command in psaux output has Nginx in it, or the name itself is Nginx, doesn't mean Nginx is running in it, right? Nginx server is running in it. So that is one thing. So what else can you do? Maybe the next thing to check is, other than psaux, basically you checked if psaux says there's a command and it's named Nginx, and but it's still possible that the command looks similar to Nginx, and the command name says Nginx, but maybe behind the scenes it's running something else, right? So the next thing you can do is hit all the container ports. So you have different container ports. You can find out the container ports by looking at the container ports specification in the pod YAML, or in whatever YAML that you have declared, say stateful set or deployment or whatever. So look at all the pods finally, and the pod will have the container port also, which you probably define in a higher level resource. So check this whole container specification, container port specification, and just a moment. So check if the port is serving HTTP, like web traffic, assuming it's a web, it's a web thing. But so wait a moment. So assuming you're looking for an Nginx serving web traffic, right? So if you're assuming you're looking for a Nginx serving web traffic, then you can hit up HTTP or HTTPS. You can see if HTTP or HTTPS is running in that port, like some HTTP server or HTTPS server is running in that port. So hit some non-existent URL then, like for example, just some dummy blah 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 blah, blah whatever, and check if it returns a response with response body or the response headers containing Nginx in it, right? So response headers, I mean the header name and the header value. So usually non-existent URLs are served by Nginx, HTTP or HTTPS URLs are served by Nginx with the 404, right? Because it doesn't exist. Mentioning the response came from Nginx, usually in the response body, right? For example, just say served by Nginx, whatever, right? Now Nginx by default sends almost any response with the response header server : and then Nginx/version, the version number. For example, server : Nginx/1.29.0. But the problem with this approach is it's not necessary that our Nginx is serving HTTP or HTTPS traffic. So this violates any assumptions around that. So if you're looking for an Nginx server serving TCP traffic as a proxy, TCP proxy for a protocol other than web protocols like HTTP, HTTPS. For example, PostgreSQL proxy, MySQL proxy, or any proxy for any protocol, right? Custom protocol on top of TCP. Right? So, like if you have a TCP Nginx server, then like which is serving TCP traffic, then it's going to be hard. Like you can't just hit some non-existent URL on the TCP. Maybe you can send some, TCP traffic. You can send some, you know, data. You can send some network packets and see if it returns something. But it'll be really hard to find out if it's an Nginx or some other, server, TCP server running something else, say HA proxy or whatever, right? So if it's HTTP, HTTPS, even then, if it's HTTP and HTTPS, say server or proxy or whatever, um, so for example, or it can be a TCP server for something else, right? So if it is HTTP, right, HTTP, HTTPS traffic, even then, for non-existent URLs, it doesn't have to send the same response, the default response, right, that Nginx sends saying 404 not found or whatever. You can actually customize. So if the Nginx is customized saying, hey, if it's a 404, then give this custom error page. And the Nginx can also be customized to say that don't return response headers which contain the server header name with the information that Nginx is the server, because like for security reasons they might have removed this, because if an attacker is trying to attack and they find out that the server that they are hitting is actually an Nginx server by looking at the server response header, the default one, find out that it's Nginx and find out the version, say in this case say 1.29.0 for example, then they'll be able to actually attack the Nginx by looking at all the possible vulnerabilities of that version, the version of Nginx, and try to attack the Nginx, right? So this kind of information, this is true even for say something like say any HTTP server that you're running, especially a HTTP server that is actually like a open source software, for example, say Apache HTTPD, say Kubernetes API server. So for example, in Kubernetes, you can get the Kubernetes API servers version. Some people who are not even authenticated and authorized can get the Kubernetes API server version, which is not a good thing, because if you can get the API server version, let's say you get the server version using kubectl version, right? The command kubectl version command, then and you get the version, say the server version, then you can actually hit that Kubernetes API server with some traffic that can cause harm that you can use to attack the Kubernetes API server, because you know it's a particular version and you know the open vulnerabilities out there, the security vulnerabilities out there for that version, and how there is a newer version to update to actually fix those security vulnerabilities or bugs or loopholes. And maybe some vulnerabilities are not even open out there, but they might have already found it out but not disclosed it because they want to be able to exploit it. So for that version they'll be able to run a particular focused attack based on the server software and version, say Nginx and 1.29.0 or Kubernetes and 1. Say 10.1 or whatever, right? So given a server, what is the data, what server is running, and what is the version, assuming it says the right and real data and it's not lying, right? So because you can simply customize and say tell it's some other server or whatever. So the Nginx can be configured, I believe, to not give the response header server and not give the response header name server and the response header name server's value, which is Nginx and the version, right? So in which case, so for security vulnerabilities and for security reasons, to ensure no one is exploiting and exploiting the security vulnerabilities, knowing the version. So and to avoid exploitation basically, and for that reason, if someone has like customized, or in general they've customized and ensured that HTTP response header name server and its value is not given, then you will never know even if Nginx is running. Alright, and even if it provides that, doesn't mean Nginx is running. It can be something else. Though no one would do it, generally assuming they don't want the people accessing the server to assume it's something else or whatever. Assuming only internal traffic is allowed and external traffic is not allowed, but still someone does it, right? So what can you do, sir? In such cases, I think one thing you can do is you can use a mix of these approaches. Get all the data and try to understand with all this data if an Nginx is running. Just because the name of the pod name or container name is Nginx doesn't mean Nginx is running, but just get the data if you want, and you can check it out later. And the main thing to check is, I would say, run the Nginx command and see if it's working, and maybe just check the PSOX and also hit the container ports, assuming HTTPS traffic. So these are some ideas that I came up with. You can look at more things, for example, so here, one moment, it's command name. One moment, I think I made a mistake here. Command name, company's name, command name, entry point. Okay, and then the command name. Just a moment, check if the command names or entry points of all the. Its command name, entry point probably has a name. Command name, all the things. Its command name probably has where the command name. So if the command names have Nginx, so it misses containers where the image should not be mentioned. So yeah, here. So maybe some containers in the command name. So you can also check. You can check the source code of the command and or entry points. For example, if it's a script, say shell script, sh, bash, etc., or Python script, or JavaScript, or Perl script, etc., right? So and see if it runs a Nginx by checking for Nginx in the command name of the command that's being executed, right? So you can check the entry point inside the file also. Usually entry points are named like entry point.sh. You can get into that and see if Nginx command is being run. This is too much work though, but this is one thing that you can do. And I would say just hit the container ports, and you can have a mix of these and then try to understand if Nginx is running in it. And the best thing to do is look at base images, base container. Not the best thing. One of the other things you can do is look at base container images recursively and understand what's installed in it and how it's installed. For example, Nginx command being installed through binaries, package managers, or compiled from source code, etc. Even then, it's not easy, and even then, Nginx may not be running. Nginx, just a moment. may not be running in it, may not be running in it, and just because a command or software is named Nginx, it may not refer to the Nginx web server that we think of, right? So yeah, these are all the things that you can look at, and look at the mix of approaches, and hit the HTTPS server if it's a web traffic serving Nginx, like assuming that, or hit the TCP traffic also and see if you can find out in some way if the server is a Nginx server. So these are some methods that I thought of understanding if Nginx is running and how many Nginx instances, and even look at versions also next. So to check, for checking Nginx is running or not, and how many are running, right? So how many Nginxes are running. So yeah, that's all I had for this video, talking about how I thought about checking if Nginx is running or not in an environment. That's all I had for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.